Okay, we are going to start a three-part series on Chanukah. Let's begin. Page 84. We're discussing Chanukah. Let's start with the name itself, and we're going to give two understandings of the word. Neither of them are going to make any sense until we actually discuss what this holiday is all about. Chanukah. What does the word Chanukah mean? Chanukiah is what we light in honor of Chanukah. What does the word Chanukah actually mean?
Ka is like Hashem, no?
No. Hashem is Yud with a Hey. We just pronounce it Ka because we want to say Hashem's name.
Wait, is there no relation between the Chanukiah?
Yes, there is. The lights we light on Hanukkah, but not the word itself, no. No. What does the word Hanukkah mean, someone? Come on.
Something new.
Something new. Very, very good. Something. So what do you do with something new? You dedicate it. Like Chanukah Tabayit is what you're thinking of. It's a dedication. Or sometimes use the word inaugurate. Inaugurate. You are creating something that is new and you're celebrating, you're dedicating it. You're making a Chanukah Tabayit is to dedicate. You're making your home something special. Chanukah, we're going to see, was the last miracle, the last open miracle that happened to the Jewish people. There were many miracles that happened throughout Jewish history. Hanukkah is one of those miracles that is going to close down the spiritual world. Once this miracle happened on Hanukkah, and we're going to discuss, there are two miracles we're going to talk about. Both of these miracles shut down the spiritual world, and there were no more Nisim Geluyim. Nisim Geluyim. Open, i.e. revealed miracles. And we're going to talk about miracles because miracles are a big part of this holiday and this time of year. So Hanukkah means to rededicate, to inaugurate. What was being dedicated? What was being inaugurated? We don't know yet, but that's what the word means. Something must have been. But it also is a contraction of two words, Chanukah. What does Chanukah mean? Chanukah means to rest. They rested on Kaf Hey, the 25th. That is encoded inside the word. Who rested? From what? What happened on the 25th? We're going to see. But the word itself is revealing stuff to us.
Which part of the word is?
Chanukah. Chanukah, they rested, they stopped, something stopped on the 25th. 25th of what? We're going to see. Let's start with a little bit of history, because this is a rabbinic, there are two rabbinic holidays. This is one of them. Let's have a look, because it's going to involve the second Beit HaMikdash. Let's have a look. On page 84, you'll see a little timeline of where we are. The temple was built in the year 353 BCE, before the Common Era. 353 for the Greeks, in the form of Alexander the Great, first of all, God bless you, came in to Israel and took over, gradually took over the land and took control of the land of Israel. After he died at a very young age, he was in his early 30s, Antiochus III, who was the ruler of Syria as well at the time, he took over, and then Antiochus IV took over in 175 BCE. In 168 BCE, the temple is desecrated by Antiochus IV. We'll see who he was and why he wanted to desecrate. He didn't destroy. That wasn't their goal. Their goal was to desecrate, to defile, to make unholy the Beit HaMikdash, the second Beit HaMikdash. We're now 200 years into the temple's existence, second temple, and about 200 years before the destruction by the Romans. The Greeks, when they took control of Israel, we're going to see a lot about who they were, what they wanted, why they didn't attack the Jewish homes, and they didn't try to kill lots of people. They wanted to desecrate that which was kadosh, holy. And it didn't start that way. It actually started quite well. We'll see soon in a minute. Eventually, there was a group called the Hashmonaim, the Hasmoneans, and they were a group of band of brothers. They were actually like guerrilla warfare is really what was happening in Israel. They don't describe it, that's really what it was. And they were able, amazingly, to push off this Greek rulership in Jerusalem when they overtook the temple. We're going to see why and how they did it. And that happened in 165 BC. So that's really the date you want. 165 BCE is the date of the miracle of Hanukkah. What the miracle was, why it was, what was it all about, we're going to see over the next few classes. And eventually the Hashmonaim took over and they started to rule. That didn't end so well, and eventually the Romans came, and by 68 of the Common Era, the second temple was destroyed. So what started with the Greeks, there was a temporary push-off, and that ended up with the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. We're not going to talk about the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. That's another topic done by the Romans. We've got to figure out who the Greeks were, what they wanted, why they took over Israel, why they took over the Beit HaMikdash specifically. They made that their home base, and that's what we're going to figure out, okay? So that's pretty much everything we need to discuss in a nutshell. Are we good? Okay. We're going to talk about him in a second. He basically comes in, takes over. He loses position, and then Antiochus IV takes over and reigns after him. We're going to see that basically there were 4 rulers who took over from Alexander the Great after he entered into the land of Israel. Let's have a look at a piece of Gemara on this. A piece of Gemara, because the Gemara is going to describe this story. Unlike Purim, that happened before or after this story. Is Purim before this or after this?
After.
Before. Purim is between the first and second temple. This is 200 years during the second temple. So we have prophets at the time of the Purim story, but there is no prophecy at this point. At this point is pretty much the closing down of it all, and instead we have Gemara. That's why there's no books of prophets about this. There are books written, but they're not books of prophecy. However, right, we are going to see the Gemara is going to talk about it. So the Gemara starts with a question. Look inside. It's one of the most famous questions on Hanukkah that you're ever going to see, and it is the strangest question on page 84 at the bottom.
It was just, where would you say, where does Purim fall?
Before the building of the second temple, before all of this,
Oh,
before everything.
Why is this from?
Purim is after the destruction of the first temple and before the building of the second temple. You're way before any of these dates. This calendar begins at the beginning of the second temple. Purim is all before. Okay? All right. Yeah.
Isn't the Gemara for Shabbat supposed to be about Shabbat?
Yes. Why is the story of Hanukkah in the tractate of Shabbat? Does anyone want to know? So the connection is going to be lights. Lights of Shabbat and lights of Hanukkah. That's going to be there's going to be other connective aspects to it, but that is one of the reasons why the story of Hanukkah is in tractate Shabbat. Yeah.
Someone told me that the Sefer HaChaim, the Book of Life, is actually closed on Hanukkah.
Okay. You're now jumping like to the end of the whole thing. There is a concept in Kabbalistic thought that the Hasidim talk about, that the judgment for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur does extend all the way to Hanukkah, right? But closes on that. Okay, so we're going to, we may touch upon it. That's already beyond. Let's start with the basics. Let's start with the Gemara. We can't go back to Pesukim because there is no Tanakh that's describing this story, right? Because this is after everything was closed off. So the Gemara asks, my Chanukah. My Chanukah. What is my Chanukah? It's Aramaic. My Chanukah means what is Chanukah. Even the Gemara had to ask, and it's like, what is this holiday all about? How did this come around? What happened that created this holiday that we have these mitzvah to do on this day, that we don't say tachanun, which means there are days that we're going to say Hallel on every single day of this rabbinic holiday. What precisely is this about? And the Gemara gives a little history into it. And it says, and every word of here is important, Shenichnasu Yavanim, the Greeks, Yavan, the Greeks, or Yavanim in the plural, but in the singular it's Yavan. They entered into the Heichal. So at this point, the Gemara assumes, that the Greeks had overtaken large parts of Eretz Yisrael, right? They came and a word they use against us, the Jewish people, which is wrongly used, they actually colonized. They actually came and colonized the land of Israel, which is why what we're doing is recolonizing our original land right now, okay? We are not colonizers, we are recolonizers. Okay, so the Greeks came in and they made a straight line to the Heichal, which is the Holy of Holies, inside the Beit HaMikdash. I want to stop for 1 second, because they went into, the Gemara doesn't talk about the entry into Israel at this point, right? It will elsewhere, but right now it's like they did something, they wanted to make a statement by going to the holiest place in the Jewish world.
Did they know that?
The Heichal. Oh, they knew that. Oh, they absolutely knew what they were doing. They didn't lose their way. You don't just walk into the Heichal. That's the Beit HaMikdash, right? You're making a big thing. I want to just give you a little context, because we don't discuss it in this class. We do in my Mashiach class, just to give you, when you see the word Greeks, what you immediately should realize is that we're dealing with something more than just an invasion of people into Israel. Israel's been invaded many, many times. But I want to give you just a little background, those people who haven't done the Mashiach class with me, just to understand how this falls out in the scheme of Jewish history. So listen very carefully and watch. We know that Yaakov, we actually talk about it in the parashah now, had to leave Israel. Remember that? Because his twin brother was going to kill him and attack him. So he leaves to go and live with his uncle Lavan. He's there for 20 years. As he is about to leave Israel, he has a dream, a chalom, of a sulam, of a ladder. On this ladder, he sees angels, olim, v'yordim, going up and going down. He actually saw 4 angels. These 4 angels represent the leaders of 4 nations that are going to exile the Jewish people throughout Jewish history. Let's talk about these 4 nations, and we have to figure out why this was shown to Yaakov and not to his grandfather Abraham, and not to his father Yitzchak. It was given to him directly. The answer to that is because Abraham's descendants did not all go to exile, because he had a son called Yishmael. And Yitzchak's sons did not go into exile, all of them, because he had a son called Esau. But all of Yaakov's kids, the 12 tribes of Israel, their families and their descendants, that's us, ended up in exile. Why was Yaakov shown this? Because this is Yaakov. He's going to represent all the Jewish people. Not only that, Yaakov is Mr. Galut, Mr. Exile. Why? Because in his life, he was exiled from the land of Israel. And what happens to the forefathers is a sign for their descendants. Masa Avot, similar banim. So Yaakov leaves Israel, becomes successful, and then returns. The Jewish people, his descendants, are going to be exiled and then returned. So Hashem said, what you're about to do right now, leave Israel, comes and then go back, right? That is going to happen to your descendants throughout Jewish history. He then says to him, their time in Galut, exile, is going to be a very difficult time. They're going to go through 4 major exiles. They're going to go to Israel, big in, out, and then he shows him how long each exile was even going to last. The first exile was Bavel, the Babylonian exile. That's the destruction. That's Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the first temple. Okay? And that's the first angel he saw going up, and each rung of that ladder was 1 year, and then he saw it going down. Remember, he sees the angels going up and going to, he saw the beginning of the exile, but he also saw the end of the exile. That's exile number 1, Bavel, Babylonia. Are we following? You've got to know this information. You're not going to understand what's happening in the world today without understanding this. Exile number 2, which Yaakov was shown in the form of an angel going up and going down, was the angel of Madai, Media, and Paras. Media and Paras. This was actually occurring between the first and second Beit HaMikdash, right? And that's the Purim story. The Purim story falls inside this part. So Achashverosh is a leader over there, but there were other leaders as well. We have Belshazzar, who took over from Nebuchadnezzar. We have someone called Cyrus. Cyrus, the first Persian king. He was good to the Jewish people. He allowed us to return to the land of Israel. So Cyrus falls in here as well. And he sees that this exile was going to last and goes up and up and up and up. And then he sees it going down, 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 down. Okay? So that's the second exile the Jewish people go through, the Persian Median exile. We go from Madai to Paras. You following? Great. Number 3. Number 3. 3 of 4. Number 3 of 4. Although I'm going to confuse you with a 5th as well in a minute. But hold on. Shh. The third exile is called Yavan. Yavan. That's the Greek exile. And that's what we're going to be talking about right now. And that starts with Alexander the Great, who was an incredible individual who had a major impact upon the Jewish people living in Israel. He was so good to the Jewish people, actually, and they respected him so much that the tradition tells us that for 1 year, every Jewish boy that was born was named Alexander. You'll see that many Jewish boys with the name Alexander, that's been handed down, in most cases, unless it was just picked out of thin air, by families who name their kids after a grandfather or a great-grandfather, all the way back to Alexander the Great. That was the tradition. So among the Jewish people, you'll see the name in different forms, right? Xander, Alexander, Alex. It actually comes from this. There's actually women who took the name Alex. In many cases, it comes from a grandfather. There were no boys, so it ends up going to the girl instead. That's where it comes from. We'll see who Alexander the Great was and what made him so great. What's interesting about this story, as opposed to the 2 exiles, the 2 galuts before, remember, Yaakov is seeing this in his dream. He sees the angel representing Yavan going up and then going down. Remember, Yaakov, this is all Yaakov's dream. Daniel the prophet also saw this in a different form, in the form of a, anyone know? A statue. A 4-metalled statue. Well, actually, he didn't see it. Nebuchadnezzar saw it, and he revealed to him what he was seeing. So Nebuchadnezzar had a dream that he saw the statue that was made up of 4 metals: golden head, silver arms and chest, copper legs, and iron feet. And Daniel's like, oh, yeah. My great-great-great-great-grandfather Yaakov saw that as well. You're beginning this 4 exiles. That's what you did. He saw it. He was a great prophet, according to the Abarbanel, Daniel. Actually, Daniel is the only other person in Jewish history besides Yaakov who knew when Mashiach was going to come. There were two people who knew the actual date, who decoded it. Yaakov was one, he was prevented from giving over, and Daniel, that's actually how you pronounce it. It's not Daniel or Daniel, it's Daniel. He actually gave an 8-part course over the summer, especially online, on the Sefer Daniel. It is fascinating. He was a prophet.
Who gave the 8-part course?
I did. Amazingly fascinating. Take a deep dive into it. So Daniel actually, if you want to know who he was, listen to this. Daniel the prophet was kidnapped by Nebuchadnezzar when he destroyed the first temple, was taken with thousands of young boys, and he was treated really well. They gave him the best food and accommodation because Nebuchadnezzar understood that Jews are successful and he wanted to create a brain drain. So he didn't mistreat them, he treated them very, very well. Daniel, however, refused to eat non-kosher food and only ate kosher food, and because of that he became a great prophet of God, and he ended up becoming an advisor to about 8 or 9 kings. Okay, so now he died. Daniel dies during the Purim story. In this interlude over here, he dies. We're now into the second Beit HaMikdash. Ezra takes the Jewish people back to Israel. Most Jews did not return to Israel after the Purim story. Only about 33% went back to Israel, and they rebuild the second Beit HaMikdash. Then come the Greeks. This is the third exile that Yaakov saw in his dream. I know we're saying a lot, but are you following? Okay, more.
Wait, Ezra came after Greek? Or took him back?
Before. Ezra, he takes them from Paras and Bavel, and he brings them back, and he built the second Beit HaMikdash. He was a great individual. He had Ruach HaKodesh, and he knew exactly how to build the second Beit HaMikdash. And over time, that Beit HaMikdash got bigger and more beautiful, and Herod got involved, and a lot of stuff happened. But right now, we're over here in this Greek exile. What does exile mean? What does the word galut actually mean? Well, in English, what is that? If I say a person's going into galut, exile, what does that mean? To be forced out. Forced out of where? Wherever they are, their homeland. Let me ask you a question, Sarah Nice. What we said so far, if exile means to be kicked out of your land, were they kicked out of their land over here?
No.
Yeah, they were. Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the temple and kicked out hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Jews who lived in Israel. Were they kicked out over here? No. Were they kicked out over here during the Hanukkah story? Were the Jews kicked out of Israel? No, they weren't. They were not kicked out. So exile, I'm going to redefine the term. Exile doesn't just mean Jewish people being kicked out of their land. I'll make that our land, right? That's not the only interpretation of the word exile. Exile can also mean, actually you tell me. If another nation comes in and exiles them, but they get to stay in the land, what does that mean if they're not being kicked out? How can the word galut, if Yaakov saw this as an exile, it must be a form of exile. But what kind of exile was it? A spiritual one. A spiritual one. We were not in control of the land. We could not do mitzvot, and we're going to see the Greeks started to affect us by forbidding mitzvot, and they took over temporarily the site of the Beit HaMikdash. So it's a spiritual exile. Hashem's Shekhinah, as it was, they kind of forced that out. So exile can mean geographical displacement, and it does mean that, but it also means something a lot deeper. We're being exiled, which, by the way, do we have the land of Israel right now? Yes, Baruch Hashem. Are we in Galut? Yes, we are, because the Jewish people are in Israel, but we're not safe. And we're not comfortable in our home constantly. So we are still in a state of exile, even if you live in the land of Israel. Better to be in Israel and in Galut there than in Chutz La'aretz. 1,000,000%. 1,000,000%. But that's still exile. I'll just mention the fourth one that we're not going to mention this semester, but next semester, if you do the follow-up class, we're going to talk about Tisha B'Av. And Tisha B'Av is obviously going to talk about the Roman exile. Now, this one over here, which is, it goes by a couple of names. This is Bavel, Madai Paras, Yavan, and this one over here is called by two names. Edom, Edom, which starts with Esav, because he was the head of Edom, but it's also known as Romi, the Roman exile, because Rome took over and the whole Christian world is still based out of Rome. So we actually lump those two together, much to the chagrin of many people out there, but that's pretty much how we see it. Those are the 4 exiles. Now, interestingly, for these first 3, Yaakov saw the angel going up, 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 and then coming down, 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 down. This 4th one, does anyone know what happened? Didn't see it coming down. It went up and up and up and up and up and up. And each rung is 1 year. See, it goes 100 rungs and 200 and 1,000 rungs and 1,500. And it's like Hashem. He's like starting to freak out. Are my children ever going to make it back to the land of Israel? And what did Hashem say? Yeah. Yeah, they will. They're going to. Trust me, it's all going to come to an end. And the date was revealed to me at that point, maybe later on. But it's going to come to an end. But it's going to take a long time till we get there. Those are the Daled Galiot, the 4 exiles. I'm going to mention right now, before I take questions, one last piece. We see these 4 exiles mentioned many times in the Torah, many times in Sefer Daniel, but we also see it at the Pesach Seder table. Where do we see a reference to these 4 exiles hinted at? And why? At the Pesach Seder table. Yes, more. So you want to say the 4 sons that are mentioned? I think there is a hint to them, but something more explicit, something more obvious and clear. But you're probably right, yeah. Yeah, lakachti. So there's 4 expressions that are used in the Torah to describe the Jewish people, and we drink 4 cups of wine to remember that Hashem redeems us from these 4 exiles. Is there a 5th cup of wine? Everyone has a 5th cup of wine. It's called the Kos Shel Eliyahu. Do we drink it? No. Why not? Because we haven't got out yet. We're still in exile. We're going to drink that. We'll talk about this when we talk about Pesach next semester. The whole Pesach story, actually half of it, whole Pesach Seder, or half the Pesach Seder, is actually all about the final redemption. Why are we doing a Pesach? Because we say, Hashem, you redeemed us from Mitzrayim, right? So you could redeem us from the present exile we are in right now. You have that ability. And that's why we invite who to our Pesach Seder besides your grandparents? Eliyahu. Why are we inviting Eliyahu to our Pesach Seder? Why not Moshe Rabbeinu? Why not Avraham Avinu, like the Sukkah? Because we know before Mashiach comes, Eliyahu is going to come and he's going to say, time for Mashiach to come. That's either 1 day or 3 days before Mashiach comes. So we're saying, Eliyahu, come. Announce the arrival of Mashiach. We're still celebrating this, right? Let's get rid of this holiday and let's have a much bigger holiday, which will represent the biggest cup that we don't drink yet, and that is a Kos Shel Eliyahu. That's one of the reasons it's called the Kos Shel Eliyahu. Are we pasting this all together? Sarah had a hand up first. Sarah had a question, thought, comment.
So you said that Yaakov saw the angels going up but never coming down, and we presume that means that when Mashiach comes, we'll be returned to the land of Israel, but we have Israel right now.
We do. Exile means that we're not safe and comfortable, and we don't have full control and peace in the land. So we are in exile. Just because we have a geographical placement in Israel, that doesn't mean that we are safe in Galut. Galut means we are still under control and harm of other nations. The big difference between before Mashiach comes and after is, well, a few things. Return of the Jewish people to Israel, building the 3rd and final temple, and we live in peace. If we don't have peace, which I think if you just, check the news, we're still in exile. That's the state of exile. Okay? Part of Geula, redemption, is the return to Israel, but it means living in peace in the land of Israel and not being subjugated by our neighbors. Maya and then Rachel.
So you said for the last one, it starts with Edom and Romi. It starts with Esav. And then how does it get to the Romi part? Like
The
why-
Romans
why-
are the spiritual heirs of Edom. It goes through Greece, it goes through Rome, and then it becomes the whole Christian world when it's taken over by Christianity, and that's what it becomes. Yeah, take over. Yeah, they're ideological. I won't say spiritual, but ideological descendants.
And also,
This is basically the meeting, just so you understand, guys. The meeting between Yaakov and Esav. That remember Yaakov goes back, this week's parasha, when Yaakov goes home and he meets Esav and he says, I'm going to meet you in Har Seir. I'm going to meet you at the mountain Har Seir. He says, you, go ahead and I'll meet you there. Do they meet in Har Seir? No. So what's Yaakov saying? Why is he saying, you know what, I'll meet you there? Because it's going to happen in the future when Mashiach comes. The descendants of Yaakov and Esav are going to meet and have a final battle over there.
What?
That's... Read the Haftorah, discuss it. Yeah.
Does the fact that in Israel, like, Jews are still experiencing pain, Jews are still distant from Hashem, like, is that part of exile?
1,000,000%. That is the main impact of it. The main impact, you hear a question? The fact that we are feeling pain, physical and emotional and psychological, and it's worse now than I ever remember, is exactly what exile is. This is the result. The rabbis tell us how the second Beit had not been destroyed and the Romans took over, and we would never, ever have been affected like this. It's because of the destruction of the Beit. We're still feeling the ripples of that destruction, 1,000,000%. It all goes back to Yaakov and Esav. That's where the whole thing starts. And it wasn't meant to be that way. Plan A was Esav wasn't meant to be an amazing guy. He's meant to marry. Who was Esav meant to marry? Guys, come on, focus. He was meant to marry Leah. It was the older brother for the older sister, younger brother for the younger sister. It was meant to be Esav and Leah, Yaakov and Rachel. What does he do? Esav says, I'm not interested. He marries out. He leaves the family. So now Yaakov is stuck marrying two sisters. Are you allowed to marry two sisters? No, but this is before the Torah. So before the Torah, this law did not exist. He was allowed to marry two sisters. And that's why Hashem decided to bury them separately. He buries Yaakov and Leah in Marat HaMachpelah in Hebron, and he allows Rachel to die at Kever Rachel in Bethlehem so that people shouldn't turn around after the Torah. That's us now be like, oh my God, he was married to two sisters. How can he do that? He was allowed to before the Torah. There wasn't a law before the Torah. Okay, that's where we are. Yeah.
How long did he see the angels go for in the three other ones?
It was 53,
Like the first
130. Okay, it's 70, 53, 130.
And the last one doesn't
That's how long.
have a number?
On and on and on and on and on and on and on. Yeah.
Is that accurate to how many years we were exiled?
Yeah. Now, the only challenge is how to fix the beginning and end date. So they knew, for example, they'd be in exile for 70 years. The question was, when does the clock start to figure out when it ends? And there was a machloket. You'll see, even Achashverosh and Esther and Mordechai. Why do we see this whole discussion in the Megillah of Achashverosh throwing a party? Because he had a calculation. The 70 years were up, and the Jewish people are not going back. He just miscalculated. Because when do you start the Galut clock? Is it when the first Jew leaves? Is it the greatest Jews? Is it the last Jew? When does it actually begin? That's a machlok, that's a dispute. So Achashverosh, the Purim story opens up with a party, right? 3 years into his reign. That is his calculation of the end of the 70 years that Jeremiah the prophet said the Jewish people would be in exile. And it says, hello, you guys aren't going back. I'm your new Kohen Gadol. And he dresses up as the Kohen Gadol. Why does he do that? He's like, it's all over, you're not going back. Like psychological warfare. They still do it to us. That was the fake news of the day. So there were different disputes when to begin or end the 70 years or the 53 years or the 130. That's really how it works. Does that make sense to you? Yeah? Good? Okay. So now we know where we are in history. We know where we are in terms of our spiritual history because Yaakov has this dream. And we're right now in the third galut of Yavan. So we've been through 2, and now we're going through 3. Right? This big empire, the Greek Empire, is now coming to take control. There were other people in between who took control of parts of Israel, but these are empires. These are large, vast empires who want to take control. So that's where we are. So, Shekashenichnasu Yavanim, when the Greeks entered lehechal, tamu, they made tameh kol hashmanim, all the oil.
Didn't have super special oil.
It was
First drop of, like,
super
every, like,
special oil. It was shemen, zayit, zach. When we talk about oil, we're not talking about oil coming out of the ground in Saudi Arabia. We're talking about shemen, zayit, zach. It was pure olive oil, the purest oil that existed. It came from the first pressing that comes out of the oil. There were various oils that we used in the Beit HaMikdash. This oil was exclusively for the, don't say Hanukkah, menorah. Hanukkah is something else. We're not there yet. We're not there. It was for the menorah. I'm going to tell you the difference. Great. Very, very good. The menorah is going to be the feature of this holiday. The menorah is actually the greatest symbol of Judaism that we have. I would say more than the Star of David, although people are obsessed with it. Definitely more than the Chamsa, whatever that represents, right? The menorah, if you want to pick one symbol of the Jewish people, it's the menorah. It's described. Even the symbol we have of the Ten Commandments isn't an accurate depiction, but the menorah, there's a machloket actually about the exact shape of the menorah. I'll tell you what there's in a second. It's a machloket Rambam and Rashi. But the menorah in the Beit HaMikdash had inside it the purest olive oil and was lit every single day by the Kohen Gadol. That's the background you need to know. And that's important because for some reason, these Greeks didn't start blasting and killing Jews. They walked into the Heichal and they went straight for the menorah. Now that's weird. Why are they attacking a menorah? Why are they attacking something that's made of gold? When you see what the menorah represents and what the Greeks represented, it will make sense. Yes, Sarah?
Question about what you said before. Why wouldn't the Torah be the most important symbol of Jewish people?
Okay, so the Torah is the most important possession that we have, but it's not a symbol. When I talk about symbol, I mean like a visual image. A visual image. The Torah was kept. It's also a very nice image, but we don't think about the image of the Torah. Right? It's just a scroll, right? But the image, for example, the Ark of the Covenant is an image, has its own image. Star of David is an image. The menorah, the visual representation of it is an image. A shofar is also, it's a thing you sound. It's also an image. The shape of them. We looked at it, right? When we did the shofar, the shape of it has significance. But the shape and the design of the menorah and the way it was lit is very symbolic of a lot of things, including Torah. So we're going to get there. It's a very important object and symbol, which basically is pretty much why they went to attack it.
So we said the menorah is the most important symbol because the Kohen Gadol would light the menorah every day.
Yeah.
With the pure olive oil.
Yes.
It represents.
We're going to get to that. Whatever we're going to get to. But all we know so far is the Greeks went to attack it. And they attacked the oil. And what do? They made it tameh and pure. Supposedly, every oil they used, the olive oil, had to have the stamp, God bless you, and the print that it was pure and kosher and not defiled. Whatever that meant. Had the chatima, the signature of the Kohen, whoever gave the OU, the OK, or the star K, whatever it is, on top of it. Okay. What happened? So, Ukeshagavra Malchut Beit Chashmonai, there was a group of people who came from the family of Chashmonaim, and they defeated these Greeks. This is a real quick summary from the Gemara. They defeated them, they pushed them out. By the way, this took many, many, many years. This was a long, long battle. This was years and years of warfare to control these Greeks who had tried to colonize the land of Israel from the Jewish people. They finally get rid of them, and the Gemara doesn't seem to care about this war. It doesn't talk about it. It's all about you know what? This war was all about the oil. You think wars today are about the oil? This was the original war about the oil. V'lo matzu ela pach echad. They found one pach, one jar, shel shemen, of oil, shaya munach, that still had upon it chotmo, the seal, shel kohen gadol, of the high priest. V'lo hayal ba, and all it had, lahadlik yom echad, had enough oil to last for one day. Nase bones, a miracle happened. Vedliku memenu, they were able to light from that oil, which had enough for one day, shmona yamim, for 8 days. Then the Gemara does something really weird that we are going to, it's probably the most important part, by the way, you're about to read. Maybe we just read passages like that, whatever. L'shana acheret, the year after, you've jumped a whole year. They've jumped from Hanukkah to Hanukkah. L'shana acheret, the following year, kavum vasum, the rabbis made yamim tovim, these 8 days to represent the 8 days of miracle, a hallel, that we say hallel, over hodah, and we give thanks to Hashem. What? A year later? Why a year later?
That's the next year.
Why? Why not that year? We won. Let's make a party.
Because
If you know the answer to this question, I'll be really impressed. I would not have figured it out at your age, my dear friends.
Because how can you celebrate something that happened 8 days ago? The miracle
Why not? We had a great miracle. Let's throw a party. Yeah, the lights are going. Everyone's running around. They got fiery torches.
But you want to celebrate the day of the miracle.
Oh, more's gone to it. You want to celebrate the day? Why do you have to celebrate the day of the miracle more?
Because this is the spiritual time that Hashem gave.
Oh, Bayam Mahem, Bazman Hazeh. You celebrate on the day the miracle itself. The miracle happens on a day, and the day itself has worth. That's why we say the words Bayam Mahem, Bazman Hazeh. It's all about the time. Remember the time cycle we did when we started this course? We spoke about Pesach. Time goes and time. Don't take a selfie in my class. I don't take selfies ever, but especially not in my class daily. But Yom Mahem happened in those days, but this is the time that was perfect. You know what's wild about that? What's weird about that? How can you tell the time was set aside from before? What's so strange about that? What's so weird about that? Why can you say that about Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot? Because they're in the Torah, so Hashem decides times. We're saying now that the rabbis were able to allocate a time in history and be like, this is a new holiday. What? How do they get to do that? That's crazy.
I thought they could do whatever they wanted.
No, they can't do whatever they want.
So is that why? That's why it's called Chanukah, because we're dedicating to a, like when you are inaugurating. Inauguration is a certain specific day commemorating a certain thing. So did they like name it Hanukkah because they celebrated a year later?
Exactly. They made it 8-day inauguration. They got to rededicate the temple after it was defiled, taken over by the Greeks. It's as though they rebuilt it. And it started again. And the service started again after this. Lasted a couple hundred years, and came the Romans, and they messed it up for us. But that's the way they did it. By the way, we're going to have the same question next semester when we talk about Purim. How can they make a holiday out of it? Esther and Mordecai had the same problem. They had to wait a year later, and the rabbis were like, oh, yeah, I feel it. Yeah, the energy's out there. This is the day. This is the day, and this is the time. You have to say that. Because the other holidays come from the Torah. So that means Hashem created the time from creation, because the Torah goes all the way back. But here, the rabbis are coming along. By the way, I'll add as a side point that the rabbis are going to bend themselves into pretzels trying to find a hint to Purim, which they do, and Chanukah, which they do as well, in the Torah. They're like, it's got to be that Hashem planted this story in the Torah already. And they're going to find ways of seeing Esther's name in the Torah, and Mordechai's name in the Torah, and Haman's name in the Torah, in the Torah itself, although they didn't exist in those days, just to find some illusion. Otherwise, how could you just pull out of thin air? And they're going to see that the 25th word of the Torah is or, light. They're going to find different hints and references, and they're going to see that at creation there was a darkness that went over the land, and that was the darkness of the Greek exile. Why are they doing this? Why do they need to do this? Well, obviously it's there, but they're like, we're not creating it. We're just capturing something that has always been there that we just newly discovered, like a new well of oil or water, right? We knew they were there, and we just found it. L.
So you mentioned last class about the 7 days versus 8 days. One is like within this world and one is in Hanukkah. But does Hanukkah have anything to do with that?
Very much so. Very much so. We're going to talk about the number 8, because 8 seems to be a feature of this and how that plays into this entire story. Yeah, 100%. You have to say that.
That you only say it on the first night of Hanukkah for the miracle that happens. And everything you just talked about now.
8 days of Hallel. We thank Hashem every single day. Every day of Hanukkah has equal and valid worth. 8 days of Hallel, full Hallel with a bracha. That's a big deal. That's a big deal. Even Pesach doesn't get that. Right? Every single day of these 8, because 8 is only 8 when the 7 come before it. And 7 is only 7 when you have 6 before it, right? 6 and 6, you can't just have like, 1 day. Then it's not an 8-day thing. Every day has to have equal worth. So it's eight different parts that come together.
Why don't we have 8 days of Halal on Pesach then, when it's arguably a bigger meal?
Because the redemption happened on 1 day. The first day, and then we finish off the holiday because that's when the sea split. So that's 1 and 7.
Wasn't there miracles every single day?
Specifically, we are celebrating the redemption and then splitting of the sea. So it's 1 and 7. This is every day was a miracle. Because every single day, the lights, by the way, the most famous question in Jewish history is actually on this piece, which is, why is it an 8-day holiday? Why not 7 days?
This one?
Yeah, because they had enough oil for 1 day. That means the miracle only lasted for 7 days. That's a very famous question. There are 200 answers. There are books printed and from which have hundreds of answers to this one question. We're going to look at about 4 or 5 this semester. But why isn't it a 7-day holiday when they had enough oil for 1 day? And that means the first day was not a miracle. It was a miracle as well. And they're going to. One answer is the fact they found it was the first miracle. That's one of the 200. 199 to go.
So do we say that the rabbis made a holiday, like were able to make a holiday out of this because they like looked into the Torah, like they saw Yaakov's prophecy?
That came after. That came after.
So how did
It was retroactively. They found hints of the Torah, and the Gemara is going to find it, and the Rishon HaCharonim are going to find it, but they felt it 1 year later. 1 later, they were like, yeah, this is a holiday. There were many miracles. I mean, there were many miracles that happened to the Jewish people throughout history. You don't make holidays every miracle. If we did that, we wouldn't have any regular days. Every day of the Jewish year had some miracle that happened to someone somewhere. Right? Why is this one? Manishtana ha nisim ha'ela mikol ha-nisim. I don't know. Right? Obviously, this was diametrically different, and we're going to see why.
And then we also asked the question at the beginning, like why the Greeks chose to attack specifically the
Why they chose this? Why do they check the menorah?
which is something made of gold, you said.
Menorah was a solid chunk of gold that was first made by Moshe Rabbeinu out of a solid block. Actually, he couldn't even make it. It was so complicated that he eventually, Hashem's like, you know what? Just throw it in the fire and it'll come out whole. That's literally what it was. It was just such a difficult, such a beautiful piece of artisan brilliance, and the description is in great detail. The two opinions, just so you know, the two opinions of Rashi and the Rambam, and I'm not even sure of the significance of this, but I'll tell you what the machloket is. Rashi says the menorah looked like this shape, right? 1, 2, 3. Well, everyone says go 1, 2, 1, 3, and then in the middle, yeah, that's Rashi's opinion. The Rambam says it was it was like more like this. It was more straight lines. Happens to be that from the description, this is how they calculate it. Happens to be that Lubavitch Hasidim go with the opinion of the Rambam. This is the Rambam's version, and that's why you see outside every Chabad house, right? They have this shape, right? Although traditionally, and you go to the old city, they have this shape. Right? The menorah in the old city, you know what I'm talking about? Right? In the Rova, Yehudit, in the Jewish quarter, takes on this shape. So this is a interesting machloket about the exact shape. It had flowers on it, and it got knobs on it made of gold. It was a very detailed, beautiful object that was lit every single day. Okay, let me just make sure we got it. We saw the high priest. We saw olive oil. Oh, by the way, why olive oil? And why 8 days? Why not 10 days? Why? What happened after 8 days that we didn't need the miracle anymore?
There was peace. They were gone.
No, they had gone at the beginning. That's how they were able to light it.
Why would
Day one, they were gone. That's how they found it. They kicked him out, found one jar, lasted 8 days. Why do we need 8 days? Why did Hashem be like, okay, fine. Hashem doesn't do miracles when miracles don't need to happen. Make it a 2-day miracle, and that's it.
For it to last till Shabbos or something. To make light Shabbos.
It does go through it, but that's not the reason. He came the first day. Cohen came first day. First day he came. That's enough. 8 days to make the new olive oil. You just thought of that? Yeah. It was 4 days to go get it and 4 days to bring it back. So after that, they didn't need the miracle anymore. That is one of the opinions. It was 8 days in order to get the new. Besides what the number 8 represents, that's not coincidence. It was actually 4 days, 8 days to have the new oil pressed, collected, and brought back. Remember, you're schlepping out. It wasn't so simple. Now, you're not going to your local supermarket, right? You're not walking into, your local kosher, deli and say, oh yeah, I'll have some meat, and cold cuts. Give me a couple of donuts, and because it's Hanukkah, and give me some oil so I can go like. That's not the way it was. I had to literally make it, and think about it. It's only the first pressing. Not much came out. See, it was a big deal. Okay, so that's pretty much about. Says the Rambam on page 85. He's going to give his version of this story, and then next class we're going to go back to meet someone called Noach, because Noach from the flood and his son are going to have a major part to this story as well. It didn't start in Jerusalem. It never starts in Jerusalem. It's got to start way before, right? Let's look at the Rambam. The Rambam says, "B'bai Sheni, during the times of the Second Temple, Kishemalchu Yavan Gazru Gezerot." You see, these Greeks came and they started to make Gezerot, enactments against the Jewish people. Ubatlu datam, and they made decrees against our mitzvot. V'lo henicho otam la'asok b'Torah. They didn't let us learn Torah. And they, over mitzvot, and they didn't let us do mitzvot. They forbade, by the Romans did it after them, Achashverosh did it before. This was the Nazis in Makshimam, right? This is a very common thing. No more mitzvot, no more Shabbat, no more Rosh Chodesh. Upashtu yadam b'maonam, and they wanted to destroy their religion, and they took their money, and they took their daughters. It was a tradition that when the Greeks controlled a town, they used to find a woman who's about to get married, and they would violate them the night before the wedding. This was to break the morale of the men and women. This is the way they used to treat them. They still do, unfortunately. Okay? Upartsu bo pertzot, and they violated the purity of the temple and the people. Okay? So the Greeks, the Yavanim, subjected the Jews to great hardships. Right? V'tzar lehem Yisrael ma'od. And they gave them a lot of lachatz, says the Rambam. Gadol. Ad, until Shirichem aleim Elokei Avotenu, until God came along and had mercy. So the Rambam is installing God into the picture. V'hoshiam mi'adam v'tzilam. And the God of their fathers had pity on them, and He saved them. Okay. So we don't look at this story as a bunch of people that came to Israel, and we fought them off, and we won. Let's light a menorah, let's eat donuts, and let's celebrate. Hashem's like, no. The Rambam's telling us this was a miracle. Hashem got involved himself, and that means Hashem in a miraculous, overt miraculous fashion. Hanukkah is all about open miracles. Purim is all about hidden miracles. We don't see Hashem's name mentioned in the Megillah even once. The only book of the Torah we don't see Hashem's name mentioned. Over here, we don't have a book per se, we only have the Gemara. But the Rambam's going to say, this is all about Yad Hashem. This is all about the hand of God that is saving the Jewish people at this time in order to give us back our temple. Yes, more.
You asked before why olive oil, but we don't have to.
All very, very good. So why olive oil? Why was that chosen as the liquid in the Torah? Well, first of all, olives are native to the land of Israel, right? It's a place of shemen, right? One of the 7 species that comes from the years of Noach. Very good. Olive branch. We're going to come to Noach. We're going to throw him into this equation as well. And by the way, even Noach's son is going, or descendant, is going to have a feature in the Purim story as well. Noach's going to make his way into a few stories later on in the Torah. But also oil floats to the top. So it represents the Jewish people who rise above. And that is why when they wanted to anoint a Jewish king, they would take olive oil and they would pour it onto the head of the future Jewish king in the shape of a crown. That is actually what the word Mashiach even means. Mashiach means to anoint. Anoint what? The head of the future king. With what? With olive oil. So olive oil is going to represent the Jewish people. It's going to represent the land of Israel. It's going to represent kingship. And over here, it's going to represent the light of the menorah. Because I'm going to just break it to you right now. We have to discuss this. The light of the menorah is going to represent a certain type of Torah. The menorah represents a certain type. I don't know which type of Torah. Well, the written Torah is the Ark of the Covenant. It had the Torah inside it. And the Luchot. So it represents the oral Torah, which is the Torah you can't see, because you can't see flames, right? They don't have any physicality. So the menorah is going to represent Torah Ba'al Peh, the Gemara. That's why the story is in the Gemara. And the Luchot, and the first of the Torah Moshe Rabbeinu, is the Ark. The Ark and the angels on top are going to represent the written Torah. So the menorah represents Torah Shaba'al Peh, the oral Torah, what we now know as the Gemara, Mishnah and Gemara, and the written Torah is represented by the Ark, by the Aaron. Yeah. Oh, that's why, by the way, the Kohen Gadol lit the menorah, because Moshe Rabbeinu is Mr. Torah. He represents written Torah, but the Kohen Gadol, he's going to represent the oral Torah. That's why he got to light the menorah. Yeah. Very much so. It was a very special, precious commodity that represented wealth. You wanted to cook and feed with it. Yeah, it was a very precious thing. Yes, what you wanted to say?
That it was like compared to silver and gold, like how uniform it was.
Yeah. And salt. Salt as well. Melech also had a very big, that's why he used to put salt on every korban. It's a sign of wealth and ashirat. That's why people used to pay salary in salt. So the word actually comes from salarium. Any other questions? Anything we discussed today? Because we're going to steam forward next class. We only have 3 classes after this. Yes, Sarah, on steam.
So the Ohel Moed was the representation of the Torah?
The Ohel Moed was the Holy of Holies, where the Ark was kept. And inside the Ark was the written Torah. Yes. Facing it was the menorah outside of it. Or actually interposed with a curtain between it. Yeah. So one is written Torah, and one is oral Torah. So their main problem, by the way, they didn't attack the Ark, did they? They could have. I mean, it probably wasn't there actually in the second Beit HaMikdash anyway. But they didn't attack the Torah. They wanted to attack the oral Torah. That was their problem. That we're going to see, that's what the Greeks had a beef with. More of Jewish traditions than the written Torah. They actually respected the written Torah and had it translated into Greek, as we're going to see. All right. Kinderlach, let's stop over there. It's been an hour. I'm done. We'll pick this up in Mr. Hashem on Thursday. You're welcome.